Salam and welcome to the halftime show on Pulse 95 Radio, live in the heart of Sharjah. With Manchester City currently top of the league and dominating English football, it's only right I bring on an ex-Manchester City player who can tell me the ins and outs of Manchester City. Nedum Onuha is going to be on the show today. He represented Manchester City from 2004 to 2012 and right now is doing big things in the punditry world as well as commentating all over the world. So we're going to have him on the halftime show tell us all about Manchester City, and that's going to be on Pulse 95 Radio right after the break. See you there. Salam and welcome to the halftime show on Pulse 95 Radio. We do bring the best of the best locally and internationally, and it's with great pleasure I bring on this next guest. I told you about him in the intro. It's Nedum Onuha. Nedum, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. Good to be on with you.
Listen, thoughts about being here in the UAE on City's tour? That's the first thing I'm going to jump straight into. How does it feel to be out here again? I'm sure you've been here many, many times, but how does it feel to be out here with City?
You say it's sure. This is my second time in Abu Dhabi. The first time was after the club was taken over in 2008, and it's nice to come back, especially knowing the club are history makers. 4 Premier League trophies in a row, titles in a row. It's not too bad, you could say. It's not too bad. Some might say it's historic.
You know, being an Arsenal fan, man, I cannot help but admire, man.
I knew I could see something in your eyes. It's okay, man. One day. I get it.
Hey, listen, one day, I hope when I'm alive. Listen, let's talk City. You being on the inside, what is it about them that makes them like such an immovable object, man? Because we only see it from the outside.
I think that's a good question. I think from when I was there in 2008, they started to lay a lot of foundations that would help them be successful long term. And now as time has passed, they have been successful, but you also see the fact that players and staff, they stay for a long time, really, really long time. That's credit to the club, firstly in terms of recruitment, then creating like an environment where people want to stay. They feel like it's part of their identity. Even the fact that Pep Guardiola spent more than half his managerial career in Manchester. The man from Catalonia wouldn't have been someone who I thought would love the ever-present rain in Manchester, but still, this is a part of his identity now. He's very much Mancunian. So I think there is the culture there, which has changed across many, many years, which is now at the point where everybody's driven to be successful. Whether you're on the field, whether you're off the field, you are pushing to be the very best that you can be as an individual, as a collective. And they know as well through history that you at times need to be perfect to have a chance to be successful. So all of a sudden, every game matters. Some people might say, oh, it's just September, it's just October, it's just November. But they know that puts in the groundwork to get you ready for the second half of the season where, as you probably know quite intimately, like one bad week in April can sort of derail everything for the year that came before. I just said it. Why
are you doing that, Nathan, man?
No, well, there was a very specific point. Yeah, I take it back. But I think that matters a lot. And for these players, it's business. I think within football, when you're playing for a team that plays like just on Saturdays, you play on a Saturday, you enjoy Sunday, you might enjoy Monday and so on and so forth. But these teams, like Arsenal's, like Man City's, like others who are trying to be successful, you play one game, you start to get ready for the next. That's what it is to be truly elite. This is your profession. The real joys that you have come at the end of it when you can look back. Hopefully it's something that you've won and the success that you've had. And the fact that at times your backs were against the wall, you've played in some really tough games, had some tough stretches, but you got through it and you were successful. And I think in Guardiola, in the players, in the other people who work around it, they're very good at pushing throughout a full season. And a full season is a long time. It's tough, but they're ready for it in every single way possible. And I think it's one of the reasons why they seem to have an edge come the end of the season, because they've been there, they've done that, and they're prepared to go to war and do it again.
The demands of coaching and being in there week in, week out, year in, year out, is something especially that's quite demanding from a coach and a manager like Pep Guardiola. With the documentary that's come out and the incredible achievement obviously they've done, is there something the audience don't see in how he maintains that level and gets that information across for them not to be overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think some of that comes with experience, to be honest. Because for me, I think it'd be fair to say that Pep Guardiola as a manager now is very different to when he first started with Barcelona B, when he first started with Barcelona. And I think his understanding of himself and the game of football and some of the characters within it has very much changed. Because when he first started managing, he was probably dealing with a lot of people who were, say, from the 80s, early 80s, whereas now he's coaching players who were born in the 2000s. So there is something there to be said about being able to evolve across that time. I think for the way that football's played in the Premier League compared to, say, the Bundesliga, compared to La Liga, again, is different. But what I think sets Pep apart is the fact that he is always striving to be better. He's always striving to problem solve. And I think the way that he perceives the problem is very different to the way that others do. But with the players that he has, he tries to find the best solutions available. If he had a team full of like 6'4" like centre backs, before you know it, they'll find a style of player that will work for them. But instead, he's got some of the greatest minds and technicians within world football who are all keen to get better, who are all very receptive to the information which he gives. So I think over time, the way he passes on information will change, but also the information changes itself because every year is different. For the years that City have been successful in the recent years, we've seen false nines, we've seen inverted fullbacks, we've seen centre-backs stepping into midfield, we've seen three at the back, we've seen goalkeepers being involved in build-outs. And that's a manager that has a vision to try and solve problems that the leagues and other teams will face, but then also a guy who's good enough to be able to coach the players to not only do it, but understand it. And I think when you listen to those players talk about, say what it's like to be managed by him, they all talk about how they thought they knew football until they met Pep Guardiola. So that knowledge is something that really then sets them apart when they're at City and, you know, in the future when, say, they're retired and go into management, as we've seen from the Pep Guardiola sort of coaching tree that we see around Europe now.
Yeah, you've played under some really good managers as well. And you played right back and centre back, and you could play in the middle as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken. How would you have adapted to playing the John Stones role coming in from centre back to mid, or the full back role coming in inverted? How would you have adapted to Pep Guardiola's approach?
Well, let me start by saying I've never played centre mid, and I wouldn't want to. There's way too much action in there for me. Too much action, too much running. But I think if Guardiola was my manager, something that I enjoyed was listening to coaches and trying to understand what they wanted. I wasn't somebody that would just do it. Like, I'd like to know the why. Like, I believe in understanding the why to everything gives you a greater level of understanding. And as a consequence, you can sort of do things better and understand people better. So I would have liked to listen to what he was trying to do and how he was trying to do it. Because for as much as at times, the Guardiola concept can feel quite complex. If you look at it simply, it's actually designed to make things simpler. There were times gone by where, as a defender, you'd be asked to play like big diagonal balls to wingers or like thread the needle passes or dribble out through this, that, and the other. But I think he understands the nature of the structure and giving people options and knowing that these are decisions that they can make on the field. And it's obviously going to come down to the player to decide which one's best and so on. But having those options and training those options is key. So if I was to play and to have those, and he said, he saw something in me that made him think I could go into midfield, then I'd absolutely do it. You know, right. If it was a case of, you know, just supporting midfield again, I'd absolutely do it. Not only would I do it, if I wasn't great at it to start with, I'd be working on it to make sure that I did the best version of it, because I think John Stones speaks to this quite well, that when he first went into midfield, he wasn't 100% comfortable with it. But in time, he got better and better. And the way that the manager explained it then led to him being one of the best to do it. You know, a game against Real Madrid at the Etihad is arguably one of the best performances that himself and others have ever put out in a game of European football against what, you know, the self-proclaimed like kings of Europe as such. So I think we can wonder about how we would do it. But I think if the manager, that is Pep Guardiola, sees something in you, then I think he'll coach you to be able to do it. Because very rarely have you seen people at City or these previous clubs be asked to do something which they couldn't excel at, even when the player themselves doesn't believe. In the end, he'll show them why he believes in that.
Interesting. All right, but I told you it was going to be good, folks. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back after this. Salam and welcome back to the halftime show. If you thought the first segment was good, boy, wait for what's coming up next, because Nedum Onuha is here on the show. He's already had a pop at Arsenal, so we'll take that out the way now. He couldn't up for himself, but he's here, and I'm super excited to have him on the show. Nedum, okay, I'm going to jump into the talk of the town, or at least for the last couple of seasons. Erling Haaland, he seems to be breaking every single record out there. Is it too early for the comparisons to my boy Thierry Henry or even Wayne Rooney?
So you mentioned the Arsenal hate, and it's not Arsenal hate because some of my favourite players of all time, Ian Wright, Thierry Henry, and Patrick Vieira, who also played for Man City. So pump the brakes on that. But I think
I just wanted you to say it.
Yeah, I know. And I think in regards to Erling, like in his first season breaking the Premier League's 38 game goal scoring record, that's remarkable, especially for somebody who at the time I think was 21, 22 years of age. That is astonishing. And some people say, oh, it's easy to just play for Man City. What if it was that easy? Why had nobody done it before? Whether that been Sergio or the strikers who'd had the chance to do it. It's genuinely remarkable. And I think for someone like Wayne Rooney, he's the all-time top goal scorer for Manchester United. That's a huge credit to him for the years that he was there. And I think Erling, the longer he stays, if he can stay healthy, I always like to remind people that this guy's in his low 20s. He will continue to get better. And the reason he will is not necessarily just because of how things are at City, but because he's somebody who strives to get better. Whenever you'll see something obscure online that, he tapes his mouth for sleeping, or he's using these anti-blue light glasses, that's somebody that's addicted to their craft. That's somebody that wants to be the best that they can be. So I would not bet against Erling Haaland leaving the Premier League at some point as an icon, because he seems like he's halfway there through two and a bit seasons. So yeah, Thierry Henry, incredible. Some of the Thierry Henry knee slide, some of the goals that he scored, the va-va-voom, the Renault efforts, all that stuff, amazing.
Yeah.
But I think Erling Haaland as a goal scorer, he's as good as those two. And I think his record in this era right now, where he's currently averaging basically a goal a game, think about that. If he just stays fit and stays healthy, with good fortune, I think he can do it all.
Try not to, man. It's a cheat code, bro. It's just not fair. My next question is to you is, do City play to Haaland's strengths, or does Haaland play to City's strengths?
It's a good question. I think, that is a good question. I think the way that some people believe City to play, they think it doesn't suit Haaland. So when he first came to the league, everyone was talking about how few touches he has, blah, blah, blah. But I think what some people missed from that standpoint was the technical element about football, where because of how Man City play, most teams tend to play a lower block against them. So the person who would get the least amount of touches is the person who's at the peak of it all, who is the 9, who would be isolated with more bodies around them than anyone else on the pitch. So I think things like that would miss the point. But for Erling, his strengths are some of his movement, the timing of his runs, and his ability to find space in the box. While City, they tend to get good amount of crosses in the box, create good opportunities. And as you look at Erling, it's not necessarily just about the goals that he scored, but it's some of the opportunities he's had in that time as well. So you could make a case that, for me, Erling is patient enough to know that the opportunity is going to come for him to be able to do the exact thing that he wants. But it takes a moment for City to sort of move teams around to create that space. Some people want to see him just run channels, use his speed and so on. But some of those players that run channels all the time, they don't end up scoring the amount of goals that Erling scores. So I think the two are actually, as you look at it, a match made in heaven, because you've got a guy who can finish, chances that only come because he's Erling. When he gets on somebody's shoulder and then he's 6'4", and I think as it stands this season, he's got the second or third highest top speed registered in the Premier League.
After Van de Ven, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's Van de Ven, possibly one more, and then it's Erling. Who's catching him?
Yeah, no.
But then when he's through, he's one of the best finishers in world football. So the fact that he can have those opportunities, like we saw against West Ham earlier in the season, like we saw, unfortunately for you, against your Arsenal side where he's going through, I think the two work out really well. And he's added a dimension to City, and City know that, not worst case scenario, they just know that if a chance falls to him, they've got one of the best in the business at doing it. So I think the two they work together perfectly.
It's also the type of finishes. He peels off the shoulder, he jigs to the front post, goes to the back, then he's over your head with his foot.
Yes.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's insane. Trying to coach against that is a nightmare.
Yeah, it's remarkable because firstly, no player is perfect, but there are certain traits that he has which will always affect others. And one thing that affects people more than anything is speed. If you either have it or you don't. If you're somebody going up against him and you don't, then if it comes down to a foot race, you're hoping you can catch him, or you're hoping that he does something slowly. And as we mentioned before, he's like 6'4", but he can head the ball so well. So when that ball's in the air, listen, unless I don't even know what you're supposed to do, but he's an incredible talent, and such a young player relatively as well, that will continue to get better. I think the Premier League is a great place for him to be, and for him to be getting coached by Guardiola. I think it's unleashing a level to him that, a lot of people probably hoped he would find when they saw him when he was younger, and he's certainly there right now.
Yeah. Hard for me to say it, but as he said to Mikel Arteta, stay humble, eh?
The humility always helps. Always helps.
We're going to take a quick break and more fantastic content from our guest Nedum right after the break. Salam and welcome back to the halftime show on Pulse 95 Radio. Moving into a really big part of the game, and something that my book is about, Reset, is mental fitness. And mental fitness is huge in today's game. How much has it taken a toll on players now to address their mental health and work on their mental fitness?
Yeah, I think it's huge. And one thing to mention about football is that people are having different experiences. So when I was in the Premier League with, say, QPR and with Sunderland, and to be fair, my first days with Man City, you're playing the 38 league games and you're probably going to play 4 cup games at most. So you're talking 40-odd games in a season. And if you're not an international, that's it, square, flat, nothing more. But for some of the teams that play for their national, some of the players that play for their national side, and teams who go far in the FA Cup, in the League Cup, in the Champions League, you're talking 60, 70 games a season. That's a different experience. And I think the mental side of things there, it's not necessarily just in the first season where it's novel and it's exciting. It's the fact that you're doing it again. Even the wording back in England, it's not an international break, because for some players, they're not having a break. They're actually going to do more travel and play 2 more games in that time. And football, I think at times can be very, very tough and sort of draining physically. And the mental side of things, you don't spend as much time at home as, say, other people do. You don't get a chance to do the things that sort of you want to do. You can't travel to this place, you can't travel to that place, you can't go out to this place. No, we've got a game here and we've got a game there. And everything is built around that. And I think it can be very, very tough. And I think that's where having a club that sets a good tone in terms of people being able to be open, to be honest, and to be able to be vulnerable makes a big difference. Because one thing that, people don't necessarily see when it comes down to game time is that mental fatigue, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
But if a bunch of players are mentally fatigued, when they go out on the field, they won't be able to perform because they can't manage it. Like, we see if somebody's limping, we see if somebody has blood on them from a cut. That mental side of things at times can be a bigger limiting factor. How hard is this run back to try and defend in the 90th minute? Well, it's harder when mentally you were already tired anyway. So I think it is huge. And I like that, to make it about Man City. This pre-season, for example, a lot of players didn't go to the pre-season tour, and a lot of players weren't playing in the Community Shield, even though it's a big competition in itself. Like the ones who played in the European Championship final for England weren't there for Man City. They hadn't started pre-season yet. But say on the other side of Manchester, you had the likes of Kobe Mainoo, who started that game in the Community Shield. So his last game was the same as that of John Stones, Phil Foden, and Kyle Walker. But they hadn't started pre-season yet.
Yeah.
And there's a physical side of things there, which obviously matters. There's the mental side as well. And I think knowing that you can have time to be yourself and to have time to recover before embarking on what is an incredibly long season for these people, lo and behold, a lot of people think that what sets City apart from others is the fact that come the second half of the season, they appear more ready and prepared than others. And that's more than just the physical side, because they've played the same amount of games, but mentally, maybe they're in a different position. Like, it's hard once you get through that winter spell, and now it's a game every 3 days, and it's traveling to this place, this game, that game, then international in March. That's tough. But maybe that difference that you had when you had an extra week in the summer just gone, when the manager gives you as much time off as he can during the season, mentally you can get back to being yourself and have that longing to play, as opposed to that fear of, oh, we're still doing this and I think I've done too much. The mental side is as important as the physical side. You marry the two together and you have a chance. There's obviously no guarantee, but I think the mental side is the thing which gets neglected the most. And I think even now, think about it really, how many people are listening to those players talk about the football calendar and it'd be too much and actually have a sense of like sympathy towards them? The answer is not many. But then for those players, they're embarking on what is going to be a 60, 70 game season, followed by potentially another 10 game tournament in the summer. And then when is their break? When you're working and you don't know when your next break is, think about how that would make you feel in the job that you're in right now. You'd likely break a lot of people. So I think these guys need to be listened to, because that mental and physical side of things, you need to be able to get both right if you want the product to be as good as, say, we've seen in the past and as good as we want it to be in the future.
Brilliant. Have they not got you to speak to the players? I thought you could speak really well about these things.
Me personally?
Yeah.
No. Listen, man, my mental health is helped by the fact that I don't have to go into football clubs too often. I'm relaxing. I'm with my wife. I'm with my kids, and I'm enjoying my life. But the players, they know, and I think the football club as well, and probably lots of other football clubs within that, I think they're doing everything they can to try and take care of their players. They monitor their players to know when they're up, to know when they're down. And if you can create an environment whereby people can be open, then you can be a better football club. Because if it's just a case of, with the old school mentality, or it's mentally weak to admit that you're vulnerable, then lots of people suffer, not just in that moment, but for long term throughout their life as well. But I'd like to think that we're not in that position anymore. And so people can, address things that need to be addressed before they get out of hand, and who knows what could happen.
Brilliant. Just before I let you go, Nedum, you've been a brilliant guest, man. Years back when I was at the FA doing my license, they were joking about Liverpool bringing in a throwing coach. And then as we moved up into it, now it's become normal. Like every time we're doing our courses and stuff, how much of an impact has that brought into today's game, and how much does the small elements change the bigger picture?
The small elements can be a deciding factor with two teams who are ultimately the same. And I think it's more a case of teams who work on that type of thing are more prepared. And I remember when throwing coaches were first coming in, I was playing and I was a bit more cynical. But I was only cynical until I was playing against the team, and all of a sudden, like, we'd have them penned in their final third, or as they're having a throw in, and we're being really aggressive. Fast forward 5 seconds, and their wingers running up the right side of the pitch completely unopposed because they've done it as a set piece.
Yeah, Rory Delap's throw.
No, not Rory Delap's throw. I'm talking about rotations from midfielders and fullbacks, which sets up the play for someone to be able to build out. Like when there's a throw in on like their far left, there'd be a player that would be on the far right just with like paint on the boots. And you're thinking, well, why are you standing here? 2 passes later, they're up there. And it's because they've set it up to be that way. And I think we see that more today as well, because the idea of a set piece historically is like a corner or a free kick. But a set piece now can be a goal kick because of the way that you set a team up to be able to hit them with a 3v3 in attack. A set piece now can be just general like play from like build outs. And it's ways to manipulate the opposition in a way which they don't anticipate. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand why certain things are happening. But the people who prepare their teams in that way, do in a certain manner, like you see yourself, and I'm sure lots of the audience do as well. There's a reason why the goalkeeper rolls the ball to somebody from a goal kick on the side. And then the guy will pass it to the goalkeeper. Now all of a sudden the goalkeeper's got the full field of vision to play whichever they want, whichever way they want with the moving ball. Whereas historically, it's like the goalie puts the ball down, digs his heel into the ground, creates a little mound, puts the ball there, poof, off he goes. Football's in a very, very different place. And I think some of the minds behind that are making a big difference, but in a way which some people don't notice unless you're on the field playing against it. Then it feels like they've got an extra man or an extra player, which does make a big difference.
Brilliant. Hey, listen, Nedum, man, I couldn't have thought of anyone better to come on. I'm almost at 800 episodes for the halftime show on Pulse 95 Radio, and to have you as a guest, man, I've enjoyed it selfishly. I forgot we were doing the interview, so thank you very much for your time.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And you can catch us every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, 3 to 4 UAE time. See you soon, folks. From myself and Nedum Onuha.